The October rain fell in steady sheets over Nashville's Broadway district, turning the neon-lit street into a watercolor painting of reds, blues, and golds. The tourists who usually packed the sidewalks had retreated into the honky-tonks, their laughter and the twang of live music spilling out each time a door swung open. But Emily Crawford remained at her usual spot, outside Tootsie's Orchid Lounge, her fingers moving across the strings of her weathered acoustic guitar with practiced precision. At 16, Emily had learned to navigate the world without sight, but music had always been her truest guide. She could hear the rhythm of the city, the shuffle of boots on wet pavement, the distant wail of sirens, the competing melodies from a dozen bars. Her voice rose above it all, clear and haunting, as she sang an old Patsy Cline number. The rain had soaked through her denim jacket, and her dark hair clung to her pale face. But she kept singing. She had to. The open guitar case at her feet held only $17, and they needed at least $50 to keep the electricity on another week. "Beautiful voice, sweetheart," a woman's voice called out. Emily heard the clink of coins hitting the case and felt a momentary warmth despite the cold rain. "Thank you, ma'am," Emily replied. Her unseeing eyes turned in the direction of the voice. "Stay dry out there." The evening crowd began to thin as the rain intensified. Emily's fingers were growing numb, making it harder to find the right chords. She was halfway through Crazy when she heard heavy footsteps approaching. Footsteps she recognized immediately. "Baby, that's enough for tonight." Her father's voice was rough, slurred at the edges. Daniel Crawford stumbled slightly as he reached her, and Emily could smell the whiskey on his breath even through the rain. "Let's get you home." Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She'd learned years ago that arguing with her father when he was drunk only made things worse. She carefully placed her guitar in its case, feeling for the bills and coins scattered at the bottom. $23. Not enough, but it would have to do. Daniel took her arm, his grip unsteady, and guided her down Broadway. Emily counted the blocks in her head, past the sounds of Sweet Caroline pouring from Rippy's, past the smell of hot chicken from Hattie B's, left on 4th Avenue. Their apartment was a 20-minute walk, and her father's silence told her he was lost in whatever darkness the alcohol helped him escape. Their building stood in a neighborhood where Nashville's glitter faded into gray reality. The elevator had been broken for months, so Daniel led Emily up 3 flights of stairs, both of them dripping water onto the worn carpet. Inside their 1-bedroom apartment, the air was stale and cold. The heat had been shut off 2 days ago. "I'll make us some ramen," Emily said, shrugging off her wet jacket. She navigated to the kitchenette with the muscle memory of someone who'd walked these same steps 1,000 times. The apartment was small enough that she'd memorized every distance, every obstacle. "I'm not hungry," Daniel muttered, and she heard him collapse onto the couch that also served as his bed. Within minutes, his snoring filled the small space. Emily stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot water she couldn't afford to waste on tea. She thought about her mother, not the real woman who'd left when Emily was 5, but the fantasy version she'd created over the years. In her imagination, her mother was successful, happy, living a life somewhere bright and warm. Emily preferred that fiction to the truth her father had told her, that Victoria Hartwell had looked at her blind daughter and decided motherhood was an obstacle to her ambitions. The next morning arrived gray and damp. Daniel was already gone when Emily woke, probably to his day job at a construction site, though lately those jobs came less frequently. She got ready with efficient movements, shower, dress in jeans and a black sweater, braid her long dark hair. She made a peanut butter sandwich for lunch and grabbed her guitar. Broadway looked different in daylight, scrubbed clean by the previous night's rain. Emily found her spot, and began to play, starting with gospel songs for the sparse morning crowd. By noon, a small group had gathered, and she transitioned to country classics. Her voice had a quality that made people stop. Not just good, but authentic, carrying emotion that couldn't be faked. "You've got a gift, young lady," an older man said, dropping a $5 bill in her case. "My grandmother used to sing like that," a woman added. "Brings back memories." Emily smiled and thanked them, but part of her mind was always calculating. $32 so far. She needed to make $75 today to cover what they owed the landlord, Mr. Chen, who'd been patient but had limits. The lunch crowd came and went. Emily's throat was getting tired, but she pushed through, transitioning to more upbeat songs. She was midway through Jolene when she sensed a shift in the energy around her. The usual background noise of the street seemed to pause, and she heard whispered voices. "Is that really her? Oh my God, I think it is. Should we ask for a picture?" Emily kept singing, unsure what the commotion was about. Then she heard a voice that made her fingers falter on the strings. A voice she'd heard thousands of times on her father's old country music albums, on the radio, in her dreams of what a music career might sound like. "Don't stop on my account, honey," Reba McEntire said warmly. That was beautiful. Emily's breath caught. She must have looked as shocked as she felt, because Reba laughed, a kind sound that put her slightly at ease. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your performance," Reba continued. "I was just walking by and heard this incredible voice, had to stop and listen." "Miss McEntire?" Emily managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is it really you?" "It really is, sweetheart." "And you are?" Emily Crawford." She could feel her face flushing. Behind Reba, she could hear phones clicking, people taking pictures, probably posting to social media already. "I can't believe you stopped. I've been singing your songs since I was little." Reba knelt down beside Emily's guitar case, and Emily heard the rustle of fabric. "How long have you been playing out here, Emily?" "About a year," Emily admitted. "My dad, he had some setbacks. I help out when I can." There was a pause, and Emily wondered if she'd said too much. But when Reba spoke again, her voice was gentle with understanding. "I know about setbacks. When I was starting out, I sang anywhere that would have me. Rodeos, county fairs, parking lots. The important thing is, you've got real talent. That's not something that can be taught." Reba stood up. "Do you write your own songs?" "I try to," Emily said. "It's hard to write things down, so I have to memorize everything. But I've got about a dozen originals. Would you sing one for me?" Emily's heart was racing. She took a breath to steady herself and began one of her favorite compositions, a song about finding light in darkness. Her fingers found the chords naturally, and she let herself get lost in the music the way she always did, forgetting the crowd, the wet pavement, even Reba McEntire standing 3 feet away. When she finished, the applause startled her back to reality. But it was Reba's voice she focused on. "Emily, that was exceptional. Have you ever recorded anything? Worked with a producer?" "No, ma'am. I wouldn't even know where to start with something like that." Emily heard Reba move closer and then felt a business card pressed into her hand. "This is a friend of mine, Jack Peterson. He's a producer here in Nashville, works with new artists. I'm going to call him tonight and tell him about you. I want you to reach out to him, okay? Don't let this opportunity pass by." "I don't understand," Emily said, overwhelmed. "Why would you help me?" "Because I remember what it's like to need help," Reba said simply. "And because talent like yours deserves a chance. You keep singing, Emily Crawford. The world needs to hear that voice." Emily felt tears welling up, and she wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "You take care of yourself," Reba said, and Emily heard her footsteps moving away, followed by the excited chatter of fans asking for autographs and photos. Emily sat there for a long moment, holding the business card, her fingers tracing the raised lettering. It felt like a dream. She wanted to call her father, to tell someone, but her phone had been shut off last week. Instead, she placed the card carefully in her jacket pocket and picked up her guitar again. As she began to play, she didn't notice the woman standing 50 feet away, partially hidden behind a group of tourists. Victoria Hartwell had been walking to a business lunch when she'd seen the crowd gathering. Some instinct had made her stop, had made her push through the people to see what was happening. And then she'd heard the voice. Victoria's hand had flown to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She'd know that voice anywhere. It was her own voice. The voice she'd had before years of corporate meetings had hardened it, before ambition had filed away its softness. But it was more than that. The girl was blind. The girl was singing. The girl was exactly where Victoria had left her 11 years ago, in this same city, in this same struggle. She'd watched from a distance as Reba McEntire of all people, stopped to talk to her daughter. Victoria had wanted to move closer, to hear what they were saying, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She'd stood frozen, watching this scene play out like a movie she couldn't pause. Now, as the country music superstar walked away and Emily resumed playing, Victoria remained rooted in place. She was supposed to be at lunch with the board members of Hartwell Entertainment, her independent label that had made her one of the most powerful women in the music industry. Instead, she was standing in the rain on Broadway, staring at the daughter she'd abandoned, the daughter who was singing her heart out for spare change. Victoria's phone buzzed in her designer purse. She ignored it. Her driver was probably wondering where she was. The board members were probably checking their watches. But Victoria couldn't move. She watched Emily play 2 more songs before finally turning away, her mind racing. She'd built her empire by making hard choices, by never looking back, by refusing to let sentiment cloud her judgment. She'd convinced herself that leaving Emily with Daniel had been the right choice, that a blind child needed more than Victoria could give, that Emily would be better off without a mother who wasn't ready for that responsibility. But watching her daughter now, seeing the determination in her young face, the skill in her hands, the pure emotion in her voice, Victoria felt something crack inside the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her past. She walked back to her car in a daze, her mind spinning. Her driver opened the door, and she slid into the back seat of the black Mercedes, her hands shaking. "Ma'am? Are you all right?" the driver asked. "Should I take you to the restaurant?" Victoria looked out the window at Broadway, at the life she'd left behind. "No," she said quietly. "Take me back to the office. Cancel my lunch." As the car pulled away, Victoria made a decision. She didn't know what it meant yet, didn't know what she was going to do, but she couldn't walk away again. Not this time. Emily was still thinking about Reba McEntire 3 hours later when she packed up her guitar. The business card in her pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, a tangible promise of something she barely dared to hope for. She'd made $92 today, more than double her usual take. People had been more generous after word spread that Reba had stopped to listen. The walk home seemed shorter, her steps lighter despite the weight of her guitar case. Emily was so lost in thought that she almost didn't hear the footsteps matching her pace on the sidewalk. "Emily Crawford," a man's voice called out. She stopped, her body tensing automatically. Street smarts had taught her to be cautious. "Who's asking?" "My name is Jack Peterson. Reba McEntire called me about an hour ago. Told me I had to meet the most talented young singer in Nashville." His voice was friendly, middle-aged, with the warm drawl of someone who'd spent their life in Tennessee. She said you'd be out on Broadway. Took me a while to find you." Emily's heart skipped. "You're the producer. From the card. That's me. Listen, I know this is unexpected, and you don't know me from Adam. But would you be willing to meet at my studio tomorrow? Just to talk. Maybe record a couple of songs so I can hear what you sound like with proper equipment. No pressure, no commitment. Just a conversation about your music." Emily's mind raced. This was happening too fast. Yesterday, she'd been just another street performer. Today, Reba McEntire had stopped to listen, and now a real producer wanted to work with her. It felt impossible. "I don't have money for studio time," Emily said carefully. Jack laughed. "Honey, when Reba McEntire tells me to work with someone, the first session is on the house. Besides, something tells me this is going to be worth my time. What do you say? Tomorrow at 2? Emily felt for the card in her pocket. "Can I call you tonight? I need to check with my dad first." "Of course. My cell number's on that card. You call me any time before midnight. We'll set it up." He paused. "Emily, I've been in this business 30 years. I can count on one hand the number of times Reba has called me personally about an artist. You've got something special. Don't let fear talk you out of exploring it." After Jack left, Emily stood on the sidewalk, her mind spinning. She needed to tell her father. She needed to make him understand that this could be their way out. The apartment was dark when she got home. Daniel wasn't there, which wasn't unusual for a Thursday evening. He often stopped at Murphy's bar after work, sometimes not coming home until well after midnight. Emily put away her guitar, made herself dinner, and waited. At 9 o'clock, she heard his key in the lock. The moment he walked in, she could tell he'd been drinking more than usual. His footsteps were uneven, and he bumped into the table. "Dad, something amazing happened today," Emily started, trying to catch him before he collapsed into sleep. "Reba McEntire. The Reba McEntire. She stopped to listen to me play, and she connected me with a producer who wants to record some of my songs." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were slurred but heavy with something Emily couldn't quite identify. "That's great, baby. That's real great. Dad, this could be our chance. If I can get a recording, maybe get some attention, maybe we could what?" Daniel's voice had turned sharp. "You think you're going to be a star, Emily? You think some producer is going to make you famous?" Emily felt like she'd been slapped. "I just thought—" "Your mother thought she was going to be a star too. You know where that got her? Got her out the door and out of our lives." Daniel's voice cracked. "I've seen this before, Em. These people, they fill your head with dreams, and then they disappear. The only one who's been here, who's stayed, is me. I know that, Dad. I'm not trying to leave. I'm trying to help us." She heard him sink onto the couch. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. I worry about you. This city chews people up. It chewed up your mother, and it's been chewing on me for years. I don't want it to do the same to you." Emily crossed the room and sat beside him, finding his hand. "This is different. I'm not going to leave you. But I have to try, Dad. Music is all I have." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You call that producer tomorrow. But Em, promise me something. Promise me you won't forget where you came from. Promise me you won't become like her." "I promise," Emily whispered, even though she wasn't entirely sure what she was promising. The next morning, Emily woke early with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She chose her best outfit, a dark blue dress her father had bought her 2 Christmases ago, paired with a cardigan. She braided her hair carefully and even put on the small gold earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. Jack's studio was in the Wedgwood, Houston neighborhood, a 20-minute bus ride from their apartment. Emily had called him the night before, and he'd arranged to have someone meet her at the bus stop to guide her to the studio. The person who met her was a woman named Carmen Rodriguez, Jack's assistant. "You must be Emily," she said warmly. "Come on. Jack's excited to meet you properly. Fair warning, he's already had about 6 cups of coffee, so he's running on high energy." The studio was everything Emily had imagined. Carmen described it to her as they walked through. Walls covered in gold and platinum records, photos of Jack with famous artists, equipment that Emily could only dream of touching. The air smelled like coffee and new carpet, and somewhere in the building, someone was playing bass. "Emily! Welcome! Welcome!" Jack's voice boomed as they entered what Carmen explained was the main recording room. "Come in, sit down. Can we get you some water? Coffee? We've got tea if you prefer." "Water would be great, thank you," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. For the next hour, Jack asked her questions about her music, her influences, her songwriting process. He was genuinely interested, leaning forward as she spoke, asking follow-up questions that showed he was really listening. It was so different from the distracted conversations she usually had with adults. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking," Jack finally said. "I want to record 3 songs today. 2 of your originals and 1 cover, your choice. No pressure, no expectations. This is just to see how you sound with proper production. We'll do a few takes of each, play around with arrangements. Think of it as exploring what your voice can do in a controlled environment. Sound good?" Emily nodded, her palms sweating. "Yes, sir. That sounds amazing." The recording session was unlike anything Emily had experienced. Jack positioned her in front of a professional microphone, gave her headphones so she could hear herself, and coached her through each song with patience and enthusiasm. Her first original was the song she'd played for Reba, the one about finding light in darkness. "Let's call that Shine Through," Jack suggested. "It needs a title for the recording. What do you think?" "I like it," Emily agreed. After each take, Jack would play it back, pointing out moments that worked particularly well and suggesting small adjustments. "You've got this thing you do at the end of phrases, this little catch in your voice. It's beautiful. Let's emphasize that more in the next take." By the time they finished all 3 songs, 4 hours had passed. Emily was exhausted but exhilarated. She'd never heard herself sound like that. Polished, professional, real. "Emily, I'm going to be straight with you," Jack said as they sat in the control room, the recordings playing softly in the background. "You've got more raw talent than most of the artists I work with. But talent alone doesn't make a career. This business is hard, especially for someone your age. You'd need your father's permission for any contracts. You'd need management. And honestly, you'd need resources." Emily's excitement deflated slightly. "I don't have money for any of that." "I know, but here's what I'm proposing. Let me clean up these recordings, mix them properly. I'll give you a professional demo that you can shop around to labels, to management companies. No charge. Call it my investment in the future of country music." He paused. "Beyond that, I can make some introductions, open some doors. But Emily, you need to understand something. This is your journey. I can guide you, but you have to walk the path." "I understand," Emily said. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. This is already more than I ever imagined." As Carmen helped Emily to the bus stop, Emily felt like she was floating. She had a demo recording. She had a producer who believed in her. Maybe, just maybe, this could actually happen. What Emily didn't know was that while she was recording, Victoria Hartwell was sitting in her corner office 12 blocks away, staring at a private investigator's report. After leaving Broadway the day before, Victoria had hired someone to find out everything about Emily's current life. The report was depressing. Father with a drinking problem, utilities shut off, living in poverty. But it also included a note about Emily being seen entering a recording studio that morning. Victoria had made calls. She knew Jack Peterson professionally. Their paths had crossed at industry events over the years. She picked up her phone and dialed his number. "Jack, it's Victoria Hartwell." "Victoria, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Jack's voice was friendly but slightly wary. Victoria's reputation preceded her. "I heard you recorded a young artist today, Emily Crawford." There was a pause. "Word travels fast. Yes, I did." Incredible voice. "Reba McEntire sent her my way. I want to sign her to my label." Jack's laugh was uncomfortable. "Victoria, I appreciate the interest, but I just met this girl today. We haven't even talked about labels or representation. She's 16, she's got a complicated home situation, and frankly, I'm not sure she's ready for the kind of pressure your label would put on her. Everyone's ready for success if it's presented properly," Victoria said smoothly. "I could offer her things other labels can't. Resources, top producers, marketing budget. I could change her life." "Why the sudden interest? You don't usually get involved in artist recruitment personally." Victoria looked out her window at the Nashville skyline. "Call it instinct. I heard her sing, and I knew she was special. Just tell her I'm interested. When she's ready to talk to labels, make sure Hartwell Entertainment is on her list." After she hung up, Victoria sat back in her leather chair. She couldn't tell Jack the truth, that Emily was her daughter, that guilt was eating her alive, that she wanted to fix her past mistakes by throwing money and opportunity at the problem. That wasn't how business worked. That wasn't how Victoria worked. But she could help Emily from the shadows, could open doors without revealing her connection. It was the least she could do. That evening, Emily got home to find her father in surprisingly good spirits. He'd gotten a call about a longer-term construction job starting Monday, which meant steady income for at least 2 months. "Tell me about the studio," Daniel said, as they ate dinner together, ramen with eggs, a feast by their current standards. Emily described everything, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. She told him about the microphone, about hearing her voice through headphones, about Jack's encouragement and the promise of a professional demo. "He wants to help me shop it around to labels," Emily said. "Dad, what if this actually happens? What if I could make money from music?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Your mother used to talk like that. All dreams and possibilities." "I'm not her," Emily said firmly. "No," Daniel agreed. "You're better than her. You've got her talent, but you've got a good heart. You won't leave people behind." He reached across the table and found her hand. "I'm proud of you, Em. I know I don't say it enough, but I am. And I'm sorry about last night. The drinking. The things I said. You deserve better." "We're going to be better," Emily said. "Both of us." The demo was ready in a week. Jack called Emily to pick it up on a crisp November morning, the kind of day when Nashville's autumn finally decided to show up after months of pretending it was still summer. Emily made the trip to the studio with her father this time. Daniel had insisted on meeting Jack, on making sure this was legitimate. "Mr. Crawford, good to meet you," Jack said, shaking Daniel's hand firmly. "Your daughter is exceptionally talented." "I know she is," Daniel replied, and Emily could hear the protective edge in his voice. "I want to make sure she's being treated right." "Fair enough. Come on in. Let me show you what we've been working on." As they sat in the control room, Jack played the finished recordings. Emily had heard rough versions during the recording session, but this was different. The songs had been mixed, mastered, and polished to professional quality. Her voice soared through the speakers, backed by subtle instrumentation that enhanced rather than overwhelmed. Emily heard her father's sharp intake of breath during the second song. When the demo finished, there was a long silence. "That's my little girl," Daniel finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's my baby. She's got something special, Mr. Crawford. I've been doing this a long time, and I don't say that lightly." Jack leaned forward. "Now, here's where we are. I've made some copies of this demo. With your permission, I'd like to send it to a few people I know. Managers, A&R reps at labels, some radio programmers. See if we can generate some interest." "What kind of labels?" Daniel asked. "Mix of major and independent. I want to cast a wide net, see what kind of offers come in. But ultimately, any decisions would be yours and Emily's." He paused. "I should mention, Victoria Hartwell at Hartwell Entertainment has expressed interest." Emily's breath caught. Hartwell Entertainment was one of the most successful independent labels in country music. "Victoria Hartwell wants to sign me? She heard you sing somewhere and asked about you. I haven't sent her the demo yet. Wanted to get your permission first." Daniel's hand tightened on the armrest. "Hartwell, that's your mother's last name." "It's a common name, Dad," Emily said quickly, though her stomach had knotted. She'd tried not to think about her mother over the years, had tried to bury the abandonment under layers of music and survival. Hearing her mother's last name in this context felt like a cruel coincidence. "I'll send it to her, along with the others," Jack said, apparently not noticing the tension. "Emily, I'm also setting you up with a lawyer. Pro bono. Don't worry. You need someone to review any contracts that come your way. This is too important to navigate without proper legal help." Over the next 2 weeks, Emily's life became a whirlwind of meetings and phone calls. The demo had generated more interest than Jack had anticipated. 4 labels wanted to meet with her, including 2 majors and 2 independents. 3 management companies reached out. A booking agent called about a showcase opportunity. Emily continued playing on Broadway during the day, but now people recognized her. Someone had posted a video of Reba stopping to listen, and it had gone viral. Tourists asked for photos. Other street performers either congratulated her or avoided her with thinly veiled jealousy. The money in her guitar case grew. $60 became $90, then $120 on a good day. Emily and her father caught up on bills. The heat got turned back on. They bought groceries without having to calculate every dollar. But success brought its own complications. Other street performers complained that Emily was taking their spots, their audiences. One man, a weathered guitarist named Ray, who'd been playing Broadway for 20 years, confronted her one afternoon. "You think you're special now? Got your little viral video? Got producers calling? Well, let me tell you something, girl. This street doesn't care about your 15 minutes. You'll be forgotten in a month." Emily didn't respond, just kept playing. But his words stung because part of her worried he was right. The first label meeting was at Sony Music Nashville. The building was gleaming and modern, filled with gold records and photographs of country music royalty. Emily wore her best dress again, her hair carefully styled by one of the other residents in her building who used to work at a salon. The A&R representative, a woman named Diane Foster, was professional and enthusiastic. She praised Emily's voice, her songwriting, her authentic sound. But as the meeting went on, Emily began to understand the reality of the music business. "We'd want to pair you with some of Nashville's top songwriters," Diane explained. "Build you a catalog of songs that really showcase your voice. And we'd need to think carefully about your image, your story. The blindness is actually a great angle. Very inspirational." Emily felt her jaw tighten. "It's not an angle. It's my life." Of course. I just mean that audiences connect with overcoming adversity. Your story is compelling." After the meeting, as Jack walked Emily out to meet her father, he asked how she felt. "Like they see me as a product, not a person," Emily admitted. "That's because you are a product to them," Jack said gently. That's not necessarily bad. It's just the business. The key is finding someone who sees you as both. Someone who wants to make money, but also respects your artistry. The meeting with Hartwell Entertainment was scheduled for the following week, and Emily found herself both dreading and anticipating it. She tried to tell herself that Victoria Hartwell probably wasn't her mother. Hartwell was a common enough last name, and what were the odds? But the knot in her stomach suggested her instincts knew something her mind didn't want to accept. The night before the meeting, Emily barely slept. She kept imagining what it would be like if it was her mother. If she'd walk into that office and hear the voice she couldn't quite remember. If Victoria would recognize her. If there would be some moment of recognition and reconciliation. But when Emily and Daniel arrived at Hartwell Entertainment's offices, a converted historic building near Music Row, they were greeted not by Victoria, but by her head of A&R, a friendly man named Robert Chen. Ms. Hartwell sends her apologies, Robert explained as he led them to a conference room. She had an unavoidable conflict today, but she wanted me to express her deep interest in working with Emily. Emily felt a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment. The meeting went differently than Sony. Robert talked about Hartwell Entertainment's philosophy of artist development, of building careers rather than chasing hits. He spoke about creative control, about the importance of authentic songwriting. What Victoria loved about your demo was how real it sounded, Robert said. You're not trying to be anyone else. In an industry full of manufactured voices, that authenticity is rare and valuable. Why isn't Ms. Hartwell here herself if she's so interested? Daniel asked, his voice skeptical. Robert smiled. Victoria is involved in the strategic direction of the label, but she trusts her team to handle artist relations. She'll certainly be part of any final decisions, but she believes in letting artists get to know the people they'd actually be working with day to day. The offer they presented was generous. A 3-album deal with a substantial advance, creative input on song selection and production, and a commitment to building Emily's career gradually rather than pushing for immediate commercial success. We'd like to start with an EP, Robert explained. 6 songs, 4 originals, 2 carefully selected covers. Give radio something to play. Give you time to develop your sound and your audience. Then we build from there. It was the best offer Emily had received. As they left the building, Daniel was quiet. "What do you think, Dad?" Emily asked. "I think I need to research this Victoria Hartwell," Daniel said. "Something about this doesn't sit right." That night, while Emily slept, Daniel spent hours on the library computer, searching for information about Victoria Hartwell. What he found made his blood run cold. Victoria Hartwell had indeed been a struggling singer in Nashville 16 years ago. She'd recorded 1 unsuccessful album before getting pregnant and leaving the music business. After her daughter was born, she'd started working in music management, eventually founding her own company. That company had grown into Hartwell Entertainment, now one of the most successful independent labels in the country. But it was the timeline that Daniel focused on. Victoria's daughter would be 16 now, the same age as Emily. And in an old interview from 5 years ago, when asked why she never talked about her personal life, Victoria had said, "I made choices early in my career that I have to live with. My focus now is on building other people's dreams." Daniel stared at the screen, his hands shaking. It was her. Victoria Hartwell was his Victoria, the woman who'd left him with a blind baby and a note saying she couldn't handle being a mother, the woman who'd broken his heart and destroyed his faith in love. And now she wanted to sign their daughter to her label. Daniel's first instinct was to call Emily, to tell her immediately. But something stopped him. He thought about the hope in Emily's voice when she talked about the Hartwell offer, the way she'd described feeling respected and valued in that meeting. If he told her now, Emily would refuse the deal out of loyalty to him. But was that fair? Was his hurt more important than Emily's opportunity? He spent the night wrestling with the decision, drinking coffee instead of whiskey, trying to think clearly. By dawn, he'd made a choice. He would research Victoria more, would try to understand what her angle was. But he wouldn't tell Emily yet, not until he knew for sure what Victoria wanted. Emily signed with Hartwell Entertainment in late November. In a conference room filled with lawyers and contracts, she couldn't see but trusted Jack and her attorney to navigate. Daniel had been strangely quiet about the whole process, but he'd ultimately given his consent, which was all Emily needed legally. "Welcome to the family," Robert Chen said warmly, shaking her hand after the signatures were complete. "We're going to do great things together." The advance payment hit their bank account 2 days later. $50,000. More money than Emily had ever imagined having. Daniel paid off their debts, covered 6 months of rent in advance, and bought Emily a professional guitar. They moved to a better apartment in East Nashville, a 2-bedroom with working heat and windows that weren't cracked. But Daniel seemed haunted. He'd stopped drinking, cold turkey to Emily's surprise and relief, but he moved through their new apartment like a ghost, distracted and distant. "Dad, are you okay?" Emily asked one evening as they ate dinner in their new kitchen with actual matching plates and chairs. "I'm fine, baby. Just adjusting." He paused. "You're happy with the label? With everything?" "I'm terrified and excited and grateful all at once," Emily admitted. "Why?" "No reason. Just making sure you feel good about it." Recording for the EP started in early December. Hartwell Entertainment had set Emily up with a producer named Lisa Bennett, a woman with 2 decades of experience and a reputation for bringing out the best in artists while respecting their vision. "I've listened to your demos about 100 times," Lisa said when they met. "You've got this quality in your voice that reminds me of the classic country singers, Patsy, Loretta, Tammy. But it's not retro. It's timeless. That's what we want to capture." Over the next 3 weeks, Emily lived in the recording studio. They started with her 4 original songs, including "Shine Through." Lisa helped Emily refine the arrangements, suggesting subtle changes that made the songs stronger without losing their authenticity. "This bridge needs something," Lisa would say, and they'd work through options together, Emily offering melodic ideas, while Lisa suggested chord progressions and instrumentation. The 2 covers were carefully chosen. One was a Dolly Parton classic that Emily reimagined with a stripped-down, intimate arrangement. The other was a contemporary song by Casey Musgraves that Lisa thought would show Emily's versatility. "Country radio likes to pigeonhole artists," Lisa explained. "By showing range in your covers, we prove you're not just one thing." Emily thrived in the creative environment. For the first time in her life, music wasn't just an escape or a survival strategy. It was her purpose, her career, her future. She worked 12-hour days in the studio, learning about production, about how to layer vocals, about the technical aspects of recording that she'd never considered. But outside the studio, complications were brewing that Emily knew nothing about. Victoria Hartwell had watched from a distance as her daughter signed with her label, as Emily recorded in her studio, as the girl she'd abandoned became the newest artist on her roster. She told herself it was enough to provide opportunity, to open doors, to help from the shadows. But it wasn't enough. Every report from the studio, every email from Lisa about Emily's progress, every glimpse of Emily in the building made Victoria's carefully constructed detachment crumble a little more. She started finding excuses to be near Studio B when Emily was recording. She'd walk past, pause to listen through the thick door, hear that voice. Her voice, the voice she'd given up on when she'd chosen business over motherhood. One afternoon in mid-December, Victoria's resolve broke. She waited until the recording session ended, until she saw Emily emerge from the studio with Lisa, laughing about something. Victoria positioned herself in the hallway, pretending to review something on her phone. "Emily!" Lisa called out. "I want you to meet someone. This is Victoria Hartwell, the founder of our label." Victoria looked up, and for the first time in 11 years, she looked directly at her daughter. Emily had Daniel's strong jawline, but Victoria's high cheekbones. Her dark hair was Victoria's hair. Even her posture, the way she held herself with cautious confidence, reminded Victoria of her younger self. "Ms. Hartwell," Emily said, extending her hand, "it's an honor to meet you. Thank you for believing in me." Victoria took her daughter's hand, and the contact felt electric. "The pleasure is mine, Emily. I've heard wonderful things about your recording sessions." "Lisa's amazing," Emily said enthusiastically. "I'm learning so much." They talked for 5 minutes. Superficial conversation about the studio, about the EP, about Emily's adjustment to professional recording. Victoria was careful, measured, revealing nothing. But inside, she was screaming. She wanted to tell Emily everything, wanted to apologize, wanted to explain. But how could she? How could she possibly explain to this talented, determined girl that she'd left her because she couldn't handle a disabled child? That she'd prioritized her own ambitions over her daughter's needs? That she'd spent 11 years telling herself it was the right choice when seeing Emily now proved it had been cowardice? "I'm looking forward to hearing the finished EP," Victoria said finally. "Welcome to Hartwell Entertainment, Emily." After Emily left, Victoria returned to her office and closed the door. For the first time in years, she cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she'd locked away long ago. Her assistant, Margaret, knocked on the door 20 minutes later. "Victoria? Are you all right? You have the board meeting in 10 minutes. Victoria wiped her eyes, fixed her makeup, and transformed back into the controlled, professional CEO that everyone knew. But something had changed. She couldn't keep pretending Emily was just another artist. Meanwhile, Daniel had been doing his own investigation. He'd hired a private investigator to follow Victoria, to document her routine, to find out if she'd shown any interest in Emily beyond the professional. The reports were clear. Victoria had been watching Emily, had been present in the building during most of her recording sessions, had even arranged to accidentally meet her. Daniel's anger grew with each report. Victoria was manipulating the situation, playing puppeteer with their daughter's life without having the courage to reveal her identity. It was classic Victoria. Strategic, calculated, self-serving. He confronted her on a cold Thursday evening, waiting outside her office building until she emerged for the day. She was walking toward her car when he stepped out from beside the building. "Hello, Victoria." She froze, her keys in her hand. For a moment, Daniel saw genuine fear in her eyes, and he felt a savage satisfaction. Then her face smoothed into a professional mask. "Daniel, I wondered when you'd figure it out. You knew who she was. When you saw her on Broadway. When you asked Jack about her. When you made the offer. You knew." "Of course I knew. I'd recognize my daughter's voice anywhere." Victoria's tone was defensive. "I'm helping her, Daniel. I'm giving her opportunities you never could." "You're using her to make yourself feel better." Daniel's voice rose. "You abandoned her, Victoria. You left us with nothing, and now you want to swoop in like some kind of savior? I left because I couldn't handle it." Victoria's composure cracked. "I was 23 years old with a failed music career, a baby I didn't plan for. And then they told me she was blind, and there might be other complications. I panicked. I made a choice. You made the wrong choice. Maybe. Probably. Victoria's shoulders sagged. But I can't change the past, Daniel. All I can do is try to help her now. By lying to her? By hiding who you are? What would you have me do? Walk in and say, "Hi, I'm your mother who abandoned you, but don't worry. I'm rich now, so everything's fine?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. She'd hate me. And she'd be right too. She deserves the truth. And what will the truth do except hurt her? Victoria looked at Daniel with pleading eyes. She's happy right now. She's recording. She's building a career. Why destroy that with a revelation that only serves to make us feel better? Daniel wanted to argue, but part of him wondered if Victoria was right. Emily was thriving. Telling her the truth would devastate her, would complicate everything, might even destroy her relationship with the label. "I won't tell her," Daniel finally said. "Yet. But Victoria, you need to understand something. Emily is my daughter. I raised her. I stayed with her when you ran. If you do anything to hurt her, if you use her or manipulate her, I will make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you did." "I would never hurt her," Victoria said softly. "Despite what you think of me, despite my mistakes, I do care about her." "Then prove it. Support her career without playing games, and stay away from her personally, unless you're ready to tell her the truth." They stood in the cold parking lot, two people bound by a shared past, and a daughter neither knew quite how to love properly. Finally, Victoria nodded. "I'll keep my distance. But Daniel, I want regular updates on how she's doing, not through investigators, directly from you. And if she asks about me, if she wants to know why the CEO is taking a personal interest, you tell her I'm just passionate about new artists." It was an uneasy truce, but it was something. Daniel walked away feeling like he'd won a battle but lost something important in the process. The EP was finished by Christmas. 6 songs that showcased Emily's voice, her songwriting, and her potential. Lisa had done an incredible job with the production, creating soundscapes that were modern enough for radio, but classic enough to feel timeless. The label scheduled the release for February, with a plan to release Shine Through as the first single in mid-January. They'd shoot a music video, do a radio tour, set up interviews. Emily's life was about to change in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. New Year's Eve found Emily at a Hartwell entertainment party, her first industry event. The label had rented out a rooftop venue overlooking downtown Nashville, and Emily navigated the space with her father beside her, describing the scene in whispered detail. There's a stage set up in the corner, string lights everywhere, about 80 people, mostly label staff and artists, lots of sparkly dresses and cowboy boots. Emily wore a burgundy dress that Lisa had helped her pick out, her hair styled in loose waves. She felt sophisticated and terrified in equal measure. "Emily!" Robert Chen appeared beside them. "I want you to meet some people. This is Travis Clark. He hosts the morning show on Highway 93. 9. Travis, this is Emily Crawford, our newest artist. Her single drops in 2 weeks." Emily shook hands, made small talk, tried to remember names and titles. The night became a blur of introductions, of conversations about music and radio and the industry. People were friendly, welcoming her into a community she'd only observed from outside. At midnight, as fireworks exploded over Nashville and the crowd counted down, Emily stood on the rooftop and allowed herself to feel hope. This was real. This was happening. What she didn't see, couldn't see, was Victoria Hartwell standing 50 feet away, watching her with an expression of mingled pride and regret. Victoria had planned to avoid the party, had told Margaret she had other commitments, but she couldn't stay away. Daniel saw her, though. He caught Victoria's eye across the crowded rooftop, and something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, or maybe just an acknowledgement of their shared connection to the girl celebrating her first real New Year's Eve as a professional artist. The single release in mid-January exceeded everyone's expectations. Shine Through got picked up by 20 country radio stations in its first week. The music video, a simple performance piece shot in black and white in the same studio where Emily had recorded, went viral online, accumulating 2 million views in 3 days. Emily's life became a whirlwind. Radio interviews, performances at small venues, a showcase at the Bluebird Cafe that left the audience in tears. The street performer from Broadway was becoming a name, a presence, someone people recognized. And through it all, Victoria watched from a distance. She read every review, watched every video, listened to every radio interview. She sent strategic emails to her marketing team, subtly pushing for more resources, more opportunities. But she kept her promise to Daniel. She stayed away personally, until the day she couldn't anymore. It was late February, and Emily was preparing for her first major performance, the opening slot at the Ryman Auditorium for an established country artist. The Ryman was sacred ground, the mother church of country music, and Emily was terrified. She was in the dressing room with Lisa, running through vocal warm-ups, when there was a knock on the door. "Emily? It's Victoria Hartwell. May I come in?" Lisa looked at Emily with surprise. The CEO rarely visited artists before performances. Emily's heart started racing, though she couldn't have explained why. "Of course, Ms. Hartwell." Victoria entered, and Lisa excused herself, leaving them alone. Victoria stood there for a moment, looking at her daughter, struggling with words that had been building for months. "I wanted to wish you luck tonight," Victoria started. "The Ryman is special. I remember the first time I performed there, back when I was trying to make it as a singer. It's a feeling you never forget." "You were a singer?" Emily asked, surprised. "I didn't know that." "A long time ago. I wasn't very good, or at least not good enough. But you, Emily, you have something I never had. You have authenticity, courage. You've overcome obstacles I can't even imagine." There was something in Victoria's voice that made Emily's skin prickle. "Thank you, Ms. Hartwell. That means a lot. Emily, I need to tell you something." Victoria's voice cracked. "And I need you to listen before you react." Emily felt her world tilting. "What is it?" 16 years ago, I had a daughter. Her name was Emily. She was born blind, and I was young and scared and selfish. I convinced myself she'd be better off without me, that I couldn't be the mother she needed. So I left. Victoria took a shaky breath. I built a career, built this company, convinced myself I'd made the right choice. And then one day last October, I was walking past Broadway and I heard someone singing. I heard my own voice, the voice I'd given up on, and I knew. Emily couldn't breathe. Her hands were shaking. "No, no, you can't be. I'm your mother, Emily. I'm Victoria Hartwell, and I'm the woman who abandoned you when you were 5 years old." The room spun. Emily grabbed the makeup counter for support, her mind racing through implications and connections and betrayals. The label, the contract, the opportunities. None of it was real. It was all guilt, all manipulation. "You've been lying to me this entire time?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "The label, the recording, everything." "The opportunities are real," Victoria said desperately. "Your talent is real. I didn't manufacture that. I just opened doors. Doors you only opened because I'm your daughter, because you felt guilty." Emily's voice rose. "This whole thing is just you trying to buy your way out of abandoning me." "No, Emily, you earned everything. The talent, the work ethic, the passion, that's all you. I just provided the platform. Get out. Emily's voice was cold. Get out of my dressing room. Get out of my life. Emily, please. I said get out. Victoria left, tears streaming down her face. Emily stood alone in the dressing room, her body shaking with rage and betrayal and a grief she didn't know how to process. There was a soft knock. Em? Baby. It's Dad. Daniel entered, and the moment Emily heard his voice, she broke. You knew who she was, didn't you? Daniel's silence was answer enough. How long? Since before you signed. I found out when I was researching the label. Daniel moved closer. I didn't tell you because I didn't want her past to destroy your future. Everything you've accomplished, Em, that's yours. She didn't give you talent. She didn't give you courage. She wasn't there for the hard years, the struggles. I was. You should have told me, Emily said. But the anger was already fading, replaced by exhaustion. Maybe, probably, but Em, you've got a show to do in an hour. The Ryman Auditorium. There are 800 people out there waiting to hear you sing. Are you going to let her steal that from you too? Emily wiped her eyes. I don't know if I can go out there. Yes, you can. Because you're stronger than both of us. You're better than both of us. Daniel took her hands. Your mother left because she was weak. I stayed, but I was weak too. Drinking. Barely keeping it together. You're the one who kept us going. You're the one who stood on Broadway in the rain and sang like your life depended on it. That wasn't her. That was you. Emily took a shaky breath, then another. Okay. I can do this. That's my girl. Lisa returned, taking one look at Emily's face and immediately understanding something had happened. We don't have to do this tonight. I can tell them you're sick. No. Emily straightened her shoulders. I'm going to perform. I'm going to sing, because that's who I am. 20 minutes later, Emily stood backstage at the Ryman, listening to the crowd noise, feeling the weight of history in the building. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. The stage manager gave her the cue. You're on in 30 seconds, Emily. Break a leg. Emily walked onto the stage, guided by a stagehand to the microphone. The crowd applauded politely, unsure who this young artist was. The lights were bright enough that even Emily could sense them, a warm glow that felt like it was holding her up. Good evening, Emily said into the microphone. My name is Emily Crawford. 6 months ago, I was singing on Broadway for Spare Change. Tonight, I'm standing on the Ryman stage, and I still can't quite believe it's real. The crowd murmured appreciatively. I want to sing a song I wrote about finding light when everything feels dark. It's called Shine Through, and it's about survival. About choosing to keep going even when it's hard. I think we all need that message sometimes. She nodded to the band, and they started the intro. Emily closed her eyes. A meaningless gesture, but one that helped her focus, and began to sing. The song was about overcoming darkness, about finding strength in unexpected places, about light that comes not from outside, but from within. As Emily sang, she thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. Her father's love despite his flaws, the kindness of strangers like Reba McEntire, her own determination to survive. And yes, she thought about her mother, about Victoria's choices, about the pain of abandonment, but also about the complicated reality that Victoria's guilt had indeed opened doors. It didn't make the betrayal okay, but it made it more human, more understandable. By the time Emily reached the final chorus, the crowd was completely silent, hanging on every note. She poured everything into those last lines, all her anger, her hurt, her hope, her determination. When the final note faded, there was a beat of silence. Then the Ryman erupted. The audience rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. Emily felt tears on her cheeks. But they were different tears now, not tears of betrayal, but tears of catharsis, of release. She performed 3 more songs. Each one met with increasing enthusiasm. By the time she left the stage, she felt transformed. She was still hurt, still angry, still processing. But she was also victorious. She had claimed this moment for herself. Backstage, people congratulated her. Lisa hugged her tightly. Daniel told her he was proud. Robert Chen said it was one of the best opening performances he'd seen at the Ryman. And in the back of the venue, sitting in the last row where no one would notice her, Victoria Hartwell watched her daughter take her bows. She didn't try to go backstage. She didn't send flowers or a note. She just watched, bearing witness to the young woman her daughter had become despite, or perhaps because of, her absence. The next morning, Emily woke in their East Nashville apartment with a headache and a heart that felt bruised but not broken. She called Jack Peterson. "I need your honest advice," Emily said. "Not as someone connected to the label, but as someone who's been in this business a long time. What should I do about Victoria?" Jack was quiet for a moment. "That's complicated, Emily. Legally, you're locked into a contract with Hartwell Entertainment. Breaking it would be expensive and messy. But more importantly, you need to ask yourself, is the label giving you what you need to succeed? I don't know anymore. How do I separate what's real from what's guilt? Look at the results. Look at the resources they've provided, the quality of the people you're working with. Lisa Bennett doesn't work with artists out of charity. She works with people she believes in. Robert Chen has been in this business 30 years and doesn't waste time on pity projects." Jack paused. "Victoria may have opened the door because you're her daughter, but everyone else is working with you because you're talented. That's the truth you need to hold on to." Over the next few weeks, Emily and Victoria maintained a careful distance. They communicated only through intermediaries, through Robert and the label staff. The EP was released to critical acclaim and modest commercial success. "Shine Through" climbed to number 38 on the country charts, an impressive showing for a debut artist. Emily did interviews, performances, slowly built her career. She moved through each day with determination, focusing on the work, on the music, on building something that was hers alone. But in quiet moments, she thought about her mother, about the woman who'd left her, who'd built an empire, who'd tried to make amends in the only way she knew how. Emily didn't know if she could forgive Victoria. She wasn't sure she even wanted to. But she was beginning to understand that people were complicated, that mistakes could be both unforgivable and understandable. In late March, Emily received an unexpected visitor at a radio station in Memphis, where she was doing an interview. Reba McEntire was also at the station that day, promoting her own new album. "Emily Crawford!" Reba's voice was warm as she spotted Emily in the hallway. "I've been following your career. That performance at the Ryman was exceptional. You've come so far since that day on Broadway." "Ms. McEntire, I never got to properly thank you. If you hadn't stopped that day, none of this would have happened. Oh, honey, you would have made it eventually. Talent like yours doesn't stay hidden." Reba paused. "Can I tell you something? When I was starting out, Dolly Parton gave me advice that changed my life. She said, 'Success is the best revenge, but only if you define success on your own terms.' I didn't understand it then, but I do now." Emily nodded slowly. "Define it on my own terms." "Exactly. Don't let other people's expectations or mistakes dictate your path. You've got a gift, Emily. Use it the way you want to, not the way anyone else thinks you should." After Reba left, Emily sat in the green room thinking about those words. She'd been so focused on being angry at Victoria, on feeling betrayed, that she'd lost sight of what mattered. The music itself, the connection with audiences, the joy of creation. That evening, Emily made a decision. She called Robert Chen. "I want to set up a meeting with Victoria," Emily said. "Not as mother and daughter, as artist and label CEO. We need to establish professional boundaries and expectations." The meeting happened the following week in a neutral conference room, with Robert present as a mediator. Victoria looked nervous, stripped of her usual confident composure. Emily wore dark sunglasses, a shield, a barrier, a statement. "I want to be clear about something," Emily started. "I'm grateful for the opportunities this label has provided. I respect the work Lisa, Robert, and the entire team have done. But going forward, our relationship needs to be purely professional. I'm an artist on your roster, nothing more." Victoria nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "I understand. I'm not ready to talk about the past. I may never be ready. But I'm not going to let our history destroy what I'm building here. So we work together as professionals. We maintain appropriate boundaries, and we focus on the music." "Can I say one thing?" Victoria asked quietly. "Not as your mother, I know I gave up that right, but as someone who's watched your journey. You're remarkable, Emily. Your strength, your talent, your integrity. I know I don't deserve to be proud of you, but I am." Emily felt tears threatening, but kept her voice steady. "Thank you. But let's be clear. I'm not remarkable because of any DNA we share. I'm remarkable because I survived. Because my father, despite his flaws, gave me love and support. Because I worked harder than anyone should have to. You don't get to claim any part of that. I know. You're right." Victoria's voice broke. "I just wanted you to know that I see you. I see what you've built from nothing. And I promise, I'll support your career without interference, without trying to manipulate or control. You have my word." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a start, a framework for coexistence, a way to move forward without destroying everything Emily had worked for. As spring turned to summer, Emily's career continued to grow. Her EP sold 30,000 copies, modest by major label standards, but impressive for a debut. She was nominated for New Artist of the Year at a major country music awards show. She opened for bigger acts, played festivals, slowly built a fan base. Daniel got sober for real this time, attending AA meetings and working with a sponsor. He got a steady job in construction management, taking pride in supporting his daughter's career in ways that didn't involve her supporting him financially. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Emily told him one evening as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, listening to the sounds of East Nashville coming alive with music. "I should be saying that to you," Daniel replied. "Everything you've accomplished, Em. You've broken every cycle I was trapped in. We broke them together." In August, Emily returned to Broadway, not as a street performer, but as a headlining artist at the Wild Horse Saloon, a major venue on the same street where she'd once played for spare change. As she stood backstage, preparing to go on, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about that rainy October day when Reba McEntire had stopped to listen, about Jack Peterson taking a chance on her, about Lisa Bennett teaching her the craft of recording, about her father's imperfect but constant love, even about Victoria, the absence that had shaped her, the presence that had complicated everything, the woman who was both her greatest wound and an unlikely part of her success. The stage manager gave her the cue. Emily walked out to thunderous applause, a sold-out crowd of 500 people who'd paid to hear her sing. She took her position at the microphone, her guitar in hand, and looked out at the audience she couldn't see but could feel. "Good evening, Nashville," she said, her voice strong and clear. My name is Emily Crawford, and I want to tell you a story about how I got here. She talked about the streets of Broadway, about singing in the rain, about the day a country music legend stopped to listen. She talked about second chances and first opportunities, about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. This journey hasn't been easy, Emily continued. I've made mistakes. People I trusted have let me down. But I've also been blessed with support from unexpected places. And through it all, I've learned that your story doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. She launched into her opening song, and the crowd sang along. For the next 90 minutes, Emily poured everything she had into that performance. Every lesson learned, every hardship overcome, every moment of doubt transformed into determination. In the back of the venue, Victoria Hartwell watched from a corner table where the staff had grudgingly allowed her to sit after she'd explained who she was. She'd promised herself she wouldn't come, had told Margaret she had other plans, but she couldn't stay away. She watched Emily command the stage with confidence and grace, watched her connect with the audience through pure authenticity. Victoria thought about the 5-year-old girl she'd left behind, the child she'd been too afraid to love. That child had become this extraordinary young woman, and Victoria had missed every step of the journey. As Emily sang Shine Through for her encore, Victoria felt something shift inside her. She'd spent 11 years trying to outrun her guilt, building an empire to prove she'd made the right choice. But watching Emily now, Victoria understood that running had been pointless. Her daughter had been here all along, surviving and thriving, becoming someone remarkable not because of Victoria, but despite her absence. After the show, Victoria didn't try to go backstage. She simply stood, left a note with the venue manager for Emily, and walked out into the warm Nashville night. Emily found the note later, when the adrenaline of performance had faded and she was packing up her equipment. The venue manager handed it to her with a curious expression. A woman said to give this to you. Wouldn't say who she was, just said you'd know. Emily's father read it to her in a quiet corner. Emily, I watched your show tonight. You were magnificent. I know I have no right to be proud, but I am. I'm proud of your talent, your strength, your grace. I'm sorry for the years I missed. Sorry for the pain I caused. I understand if you never want to have a relationship beyond professional necessity. But please know this. You deserved a better mother, and I'm sorry I couldn't be that person. You deserved so much more than I gave you. Watching you tonight, I realized that somehow, despite my failures, you found everything you needed to become who you are. That's all you, Emily. That's your victory. Keep shining through. Victoria. Emily sat with the note for a long time, her fingers tracing the paper her father had handed her. She felt a complex tangle of emotions, anger that still simmered beneath the surface, sadness for what could never be recovered, but also a strange, unexpected lightness. She wasn't ready to forgive. She might never be ready, but she was ready to stop letting Victoria's absence define her story. What do you want to do with this? Daniel asked quietly. Keep it, Emily said. Not because I'm ready to let her back in, but because it's part of the story. The messy, complicated, imperfect story of how I got here. That's wise, Em. More wise than I've been. Emily squeezed her father's hand. We're both learning, Dad. One day at a time. As they left the Wild Horse Saloon, stepping out onto Broadway where Emily's journey had truly begun, she thought about the path ahead. There would be more albums, more performances, more challenges. The music industry was unforgiving, and success was never guaranteed. But Emily had learned something crucial. She didn't need perfect parents or perfect circumstances to build a meaningful life. She needed her talent, her determination, and the support of people who believed in her for the right reasons. She thought about Reba McEntire's kindness that rainy day, about Jack Peterson's belief in her abilities, about Lisa Bennett's patient teaching, about her father's imperfect but constant love. These were the people who'd truly shaped her journey. Victoria had opened a door, yes, but Emily was the one who'd walked through it with courage and grace. 6 months later, Emily released her first full-length album. It debuted at number 12 on the country charts, a remarkable achievement for a new artist. The reviews praised her authentic voice, her emotional depth, her ability to convey complex emotions through simple, powerful lyrics. She was nominated for 3 major awards that year, including New Artist of the Year and Song of the Year for Shine Through. She didn't win. Those honors went to more established artists, but the nominations themselves were validation. Emily continued to maintain professional boundaries with Victoria. They communicated through Robert and the label staff, keeping interactions minimal and focused on business. Victoria respected the boundaries, never pushing, never demanding more than Emily was willing to give. But Victoria did continue to watch from a distance. She attended Emily's performances when she could, always sitting in the back, always leaving before the end. She ensured Emily had the resources she needed, the best producers, the best marketing, the best opportunities. But she did it quietly, through channels that didn't require direct contact. It wasn't redemption. Victoria understood that some mistakes couldn't be fixed. Some relationships couldn't be rebuilt. But it was something. A small way to support the daughter she'd failed. A quiet acknowledgement of responsibility without demanding forgiveness in return. Daniel continued his recovery journey, building a stable life that didn't revolve around alcohol or regret. He became Emily's manager for a brief period before they both agreed she needed someone with more industry experience. But he remained her most trusted advisor, the person who'd seen her at her lowest and never stopped believing in her potential. "You know what I realized?" Daniel told Emily one day as they sat in a coffee shop near Music Row. "I spent so many years angry at Victoria for leaving, angry at myself for not being enough to make her stay. But her leaving wasn't about me, and it wasn't about you. It was about her own fears and limitations. That doesn't make it okay," Emily said. "No, it doesn't. But it makes it human. And maybe understanding that she's human, flawed and frightened and imperfect, maybe that's the first step toward peace." Emily thought about that. Peace. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but simply peace. The ability to move forward without carrying the weight of old wounds. 2 years after that rainy day on Broadway, Emily headlined her first solo tour. 30 cities across the South and Midwest, playing venues that ranged from intimate theaters to small arenas. She traveled in a modest tour bus with her band, playing music every night for crowds that grew larger with each passing month. During a stop in Oklahoma City, Emily received a package at her hotel. Inside was a leather journal embossed with her initials and a note. "For your songs and your stories. May you always have the courage to tell your truth. Victoria." Emily ran her fingers over the embossed letters, feeling the quality of the leather. It was a thoughtful gift, personal without being presumptuous. She placed it in her touring bag and used it that night to write a new song about complicated relationships and the long road to healing. The song became the lead single from her second album, released 3 years after her debut. Critics called it her most mature work, praising the emotional complexity and the willingness to explore difficult truths without easy answers. Emily never explicitly said the song was about her mother, but people speculated. Victoria never commented publicly, but those who knew her said she listened to it on repeat, tears streaming down her face each time. 5 years after their confrontation at the Ryman, Emily and Victoria had their first real conversation. It happened by accident at a charity event benefiting music education for disabled children, an event Victoria's company had sponsored and where Emily was performing. They encountered each other in a hallway, and there was nowhere to hide, no way to avoid the moment. "Hello, Emily," Victoria said quietly. "Victoria." Emily kept her voice neutral, but not hostile. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Victoria said, "Thank you for performing tonight. This cause is important." "It is. Music saved my life. Every kid should have that chance." Emily paused. "Is that why you sponsored the event? The connection to disability?" Victoria looked uncomfortable. "Partly. I wanted to support something that mattered. Something I should have supported a long time ago in more personal ways." Emily felt the familiar anger start to rise, but breathed through it. "I've been working with my therapist on this, on understanding that people are complicated, that you can be both the person who left me and the person who's trying to do better. I don't deserve your understanding. Maybe not, but I deserve peace, and holding on to anger was eating me alive." Emily adjusted her sunglasses. "I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not sure I ever will, but I'm saying I see you trying, in your way, and that counts for something." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "That's more grace than I have any right to expect. It's not for you, it's for me." Emily took a breath. "I need to go prepare for my performance. But Victoria, thank you for the journal. I've written some of my best songs in it." It was a small moment, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a possibility of connection that neither of them had thought possible. 10 years after that rainy October day, when Reba McEntire stopped to listen to a blind girl singing on Broadway, Emily Crawford stood on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, inducted as the newest member of country music's most prestigious institution. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. At 26, she'd released 4 albums, won 2 Grammy Awards, and become one of the most respected voices in country music. But standing on the Opry stage, she felt like that 16-year-old girl again, singing in the rain with hope and desperation in equal measure. "I don't have a fancy speech prepared," Emily said into the microphone, her voice carrying through the historic venue. "I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who believed in me when I was nobody. Thank you to my father, who stayed when it would have been easier to leave. Thank you to Jack Peterson, Lisa Bennett, and everyone at Hartwell Entertainment who helped me build this career." She paused, feeling her way through words she'd practiced, but hadn't been sure she could say. "And thank you to Reba McEntire, who stopped one rainy day to listen to a street performer and changed my life forever. Your kindness taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to help others." In the audience, Reba wiped tears from her eyes, proud of the young woman she'd helped launch into stardom. Emily continued, "I also want to say something about second chances, about grace, about understanding that people are complicated and messy, and sometimes they make terrible mistakes. I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let past pain define your future." Near the back of the venue, Victoria Hartwell sat with tears streaming down her face. She'd been invited as the CEO of Emily's label, but she knew this moment was bigger than business. This was her daughter, brilliant, compassionate, stronger than Victoria could ever hope to be, finding a way to make peace with an imperfect past. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Emily moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, taking photos, feeling the love and support of the country music community that had embraced her. She was talking to a songwriter when she felt a gentle touch on her arm. "Emily?" "It's Victoria. Would you have a moment?" Emily excused herself from the conversation and followed Victoria to a quiet corner. "I won't keep you," Victoria said. "I just wanted to say congratulations. You've built something extraordinary. Not because of the label, not because of me, but because of your talent and your heart." "Thank you," Emily said. Then, after a moment of internal debate, she added, "Would you like to get coffee sometime? Not as CEO and artist, just as two people trying to figure out how to exist in the same space." Victoria's breath caught. "I would like that very much, but only if you're ready. I don't want to push. I'm not sure I'll ever be fully ready, but I think I'm tired of running from it. We don't have to be mother and daughter, but maybe we can be something. Two people with a shared history, trying to find a way forward." "That's more than I ever hoped for," Victoria whispered. They met for coffee 2 weeks later, in a quiet cafe far from Music Row, where no one would recognize them. The conversation was awkward at first, stilted with years of pain and misunderstanding, but slowly, tentatively, they began to talk. Victoria told Emily about her early years in Nashville, about the struggle and rejection that had made her feel inadequate. Emily talked about her childhood, about the challenges of being blind, about the strength she'd found in music. They didn't solve everything in one conversation. There were still wounds that needed time to heal, questions that might never have satisfactory answers. But they made a start. Over the following months, they had more coffee meetings. Sometimes they went weeks without talking. Sometimes the conversations were difficult, touching on painful subjects that left them both emotionally raw. But they kept trying, kept showing up, kept working towards something that resembled understanding, if not full reconciliation. Emily never called Victoria Mom. That title belonged to a relationship they'd never had, couldn't reclaim. But she started thinking of Victoria as a person rather than a symbol of abandonment. A flawed woman who'd made terrible choices, but was trying, in her limited way, to do better. Daniel watched this evolution with mixed feelings. Part of him still resented Victoria, still wanted to protect Emily from further hurt. But he also saw how making peace with her mother had freed something in Emily, had allowed her to fully step into her power without the weight of unresolved anger. "You're a better person than I am," Daniel told Emily one day. "No, Dad, I'm just tired of carrying the weight. Anger is exhausting. Understanding is lighter." 15 years after Reba McEntire stopped to listen to a blind girl on Broadway, Emily Crawford released her autobiography, titled Shine Through, a memoir of blindness, music, and finding light in darkness. The book was honest, unflinching in its examination of poverty, disability, abandonment, and the long road to success. She wrote about the hard years with her father, about the kindness of strangers, about building a career through determination and talent. She also wrote about Victoria, not with bitterness, but with compassion and complexity. She explored the pain of abandonment while also acknowledging the imperfect attempts at reconciliation. The final chapter was called Grace, and it talked about choosing healing over vengeance, understanding over judgment. The book became a bestseller, resonating with readers who'd experienced their own complicated family relationships, their own journeys through pain toward peace. At the book launch in Nashville, Emily stood before a crowd of fans, industry professionals, and family. She read a passage from the final chapter. "I used to think forgiveness meant saying what happened was okay, but forgiveness doesn't erase the past or excuse the harm. Forgiveness is releasing yourself from the prison of anger, choosing to stop letting someone else's choices define your life. My mother left me, and that shaped me in profound ways. But it doesn't own me. I'm not the abandoned blind girl anymore. I'm Emily Crawford, Grammy-winning artist, best-selling author, and most importantly, a person who chose light over darkness, hope over bitterness, growth over stagnation. After the reading, she took questions. One woman raised her hand. "Do you have a relationship with your mother now?" Emily smiled. "We have a relationship. It's not what most people would call a mother-daughter relationship, but it works for us. We meet for coffee every few months. We talk about music, about life. We're learning to be present with each other without demanding that the past be different than it was. It's not perfect, but it's real." Victoria was in the audience, sitting next to Daniel in a seating arrangement that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. The two people who'd created Emily had found their own uneasy peace, united by love for a daughter who'd surpassed them both. As Emily signed books after the event, Victoria approached the table. Emily looked up, smiled softly. "Would you sign my copy?" Victoria asked. "Of course." Emily felt for the page, her fingers finding the space. Her father had taught her to sign books with a special stamp that said, "Signed by Emily Crawford," followed by a space where she'd add a personal note in Braille that sighted readers couldn't understand. A private message in her own language. But for Victoria's book, she did something different. She wrote in regular letters, slowly and carefully, words her father helped her position correctly. "To Victoria, thank you for the gift of life and the gift of struggle. Both made me who I am. Emily." Victoria read the inscription, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't, "To Mom with love." It wasn't a declaration of complete forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, recognition, a small bridge across a vast divide. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. That night, Emily stood on her balcony overlooking Nashville, the city that had witnessed her journey from desperate street performer to successful artist. Her father joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. "You doing okay?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, Dad, I really am." Emily turned toward him, even though she couldn't see his face. "I've been thinking about that day Reba stopped to listen. How one act of kindness changed everything. How she didn't have to stop, didn't have to care, but she did. The world needs more people like her. The world needs more people like you, Dad. You stayed. You loved me even when it was hard. That matters more than anything." Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. "I didn't always do it well. No, but you did it. And that's what counts." Emily took a sip of tea. "I've been thinking I want to start a foundation to help young artists with disabilities get access to music education, equipment, opportunities. Use some of this success to pay forward what was given to me." "That's a beautiful idea, Em." They stood in comfortable silence, father and daughter, listening to the city's music drift up from Broadway, where everything had started. Emily thought about her journey, the rain-soaked streets, the empty guitar case, the day Reba McEntire stopped to listen. She thought about Victoria's absence and complicated presence, about Jack Peterson's belief, about Lisa Bennett's guidance, about all the people who'd contributed to her success. But mostly, she thought about the girl she'd been, blind, broke, desperate, and how she'd refused to let circumstances define her possibilities. That girl had become this woman, and that transformation was hers alone. The city lights blurred and shimmered, visible even to Emily's limited vision as warm glows in the darkness. She'd spent her life finding light in that darkness, and she'd learned that light didn't come from external sources. It came from within, from the choice to keep singing even when no one seemed to be listening, from the determination to shine through every obstacle. And that, Emily understood, was the real story. Not about abandonment or reconciliation, not about fame or success, but about a blind girl who chose to see possibilities instead of limitations, who turned pain into art, who learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about refusing to let it steal the future. She smiled and raised her tea in a silent toast. To that scared 16-year-old singing in the rain. To Reba McEntire's unexpected kindness. To her father's imperfect love. To Victoria's complicated attempts at redemption. And most of all, to herself and the light she'd found within. To shining through, Emily whispered into the Nashville night. And somewhere in the city below, music played on.